Today we're joined in studio with Dr. Hilton Rudnick and Curtis Loehmer, our guest. So today, if you're feeling a bit flat or tired, this is definitely the episode that's going to lighten your mood. Curtis is a delight. He has such a positive energy, and he brings that energy into teaching us tools and sharing tips on how to facilitate online, how to help with leadership coaching and training, and then also just exploring the whole new idea of what is online culture. And how do leaders now bring the best out of their staff? His background is in sports, and he's wonderful in using storytelling and metaphorical thinking. I really enjoyed his ideas in this episode, and I'm sure you're going to too. Great. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Curtis. Hi, Hilton.
Hi.
Hi, Colleen.
It's so lovely to host you on the podcast this evening, Curtis. And we're recording quite late tonight because you've had a long day facilitating. So thank you for making even extra time for us.
It's good to be here with you.
Great. So maybe just start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what's been keeping you busy?
Sure. So a little bit about me. I've got this real passion for performance, and specifically relating to how leadership drives performance. And so that in a nutshell is what my real sweet spot is. And so the company I work for is called Lead Strong, which is leader and then strong. And so it's how do we drive performance in a business and with its people, but focusing specifically on the leadership elements of that. So self-leadership, team leadership, organizational leadership, and I also have a passion for sports. So what I also do as a sort of a non-profit platform that I've created is called the Mental Gains Network, where I interview some South African sportsmen and coaches just to find out more from them in terms of the whole elements of performance and what drives them and how can we apply those learnings into our daily lives.
Wow. And I noticed when I was reading up a bit about you that your background is in marketing. And I was wondering,
Correct.
How do you come from marketing to leadership?
Good question. And I actually get asked that quite a few times. So I don't know, to be honest, Colleen. It's amazing how life works and how it unfolds. But I would say if I look back, there is a lot of psychology in marketing. And a lot of my work is involved in a lot of psychology and understanding the human being, understanding human nature, what drives a person, what drives a team. And I suppose, that is linked up and wrapped up in the marketing psychology of, how do you get a customer to do something? And I suppose, that's probably the basis of what led me then into this space. But a real answer is it happened at varsity, where I got a real passion for understanding what leadership can do to an organization. And so an experience I had in Res was we had a low-performing res, and with a couple of people that were bought in, really focused and not reading any books on it, just a raw, natural energy to make things better. I saw firsthand what leadership can do and how it can transform an organization and the people within the organization to a winning team, if I could say that, in a space of a very short time. So that's where the real fire was lit in me, because I noticed how powerful it can be.
So, Curtis, let me just pick up on these things, and I'm hearing them for the first time. I did have a look at your website. It looked really interesting. But the idea of this very active leader, this leader who galvanizes performance, it puts a lot of weight on the efficacy of the leader. And I mean, there would certainly be views of leadership where, leaders are a little bit more remote, they're guiding more strategically, they're less visible and less kind of hands-on in the way that you're describing it. I mean, maybe give us a view of how you see optimal performance from a leader in the model that you describe.
So great question, Hilton. And I suppose, in saying that, I'm a big believer in connecting the dots in terms of what leadership means to you. So any leader, they must figure out what does leadership mean to them and then make that come alive in their own way. So I agree, there's a space for people to lead in different ways, and there's effectiveness in that leadership. But it's only effective if it's true to you. So as you hear in my conversations, I'm quite an energetic person, if I can say, quite passionate about certain things, and that's the way I would lead. So it does come with a bit of that, what you're speaking of, a bit of hands-on approach, and really with the team driving us forward. But that is one way of doing it, and I've learned there's many ways of doing it, and many different tools a leader has available, that if they are perhaps not as strategic, but very energetic, to pull in that strategic vision skill set from someone to help them with that. So I think it's about also being smart as a leader to know what you are doing, but also to know what you are not doing, and to make sure you've got your bases covered.
So a follow-on. In your version of it sounds like a very charismatic, driven, kind of energetic leadership. In your version of it, what would the leader be focused on every day? Like, where do they live?
So for me, if it's related personally to me and my type of approach, Hilton. So the big thing is this whole GPS sort of methodology of doing it, where you need to know the destination first of all. And I suppose once you know what you're working towards, and clearly knowing what you're working towards, the focus then every day is seeing how are the people doing in moving us towards that vision. And I know this is a cliched answer, right? Knowing where you're going, but really, 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 where are we going? Specifically, what are we trying to achieve? And make sure that the team has bought into that vision. So I'm not a person that likes to choose the vision, choose the destination. I might have an idea of what could be good for us, but I want you to give me your inputs as well. And once we bought into this, it's about every day then seeing the behaviors of the people. Very emotionally in tune with them. So you can see if someone's down, if not feeling it, if they are feeling it, what's got them switched on and what's got them switched off, and allow them to do more things that have got them switched on and less things that have got them switched off. And I suppose that's a daily process, because it's like taking a shower. The leadership approach is a daily thing. You can't just do it once and expect the team to get there by sharing the vision once. Or by encouraging once. It's a daily process, and within that, very adaptable and flexible. If that helps you, anything else specifically? That's a bit of a high level, but there's a lot of tactical, I suppose, steps in it if we're looking for that.
Well, I think I wanted to understand a bit more of what you mean by high performance in a team. So is it just like, teams working really hard? To what degree can they just keep doing more and more, or what would you define as high performance?
So again, great question, Colleen. And for me, my version of high performance is linked to sustainable high performance. So I think anyone can do good work or perform well in one day. Any team can do good work in 1 week, but how do you keep that team performing for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years sustainably? And I think the only way you can get that is if there is some happiness that is occurring in the team. And when I talk about the concept of happiness, a lot of us, and I'm sure you can relate to me, it's sometimes a bit of an airy-fairy type of concept, right? This happiness concept. But I really think that is closely linked to performance. And the reason why, for me, is because there's this book that's called The Happiness Advantage. And it's written by a guy called Sean Akel. I don't know if you've heard of it or read it, Hilton or Colleen.
I haven't.
Okay, so what he talks about, and this is really something that I've adapted as part of my philosophy. He says that in the mid-1500s, everyone believed back then that the Earth was the center of the universe and that the sun and everything revolved around the Earth. And so there was a guy by the name of Nicholas Copernicus who famously argued that the complete opposite is true. So he said that the sun is the center and that the earth and everything revolves around the sun. Now, at that stage, people thought he was crazy, but it fundamentally changed the way we see the universe. And so what Sean is arguing, or not arguing rather, but looking at statistics and studies that they've done on the positive psychology space, they've realized that in the same way there's been a shift in that example, there's been a similar shift when it comes to the two concepts of success and happiness. So people are taught from a young age, you must just chase success. And only once you achieve a certain level of success will you ultimately only be happy. And I suppose, we all know that in various ways that's not really true, because success can be quite fleeting. Achieving a big goal, it can be happy for a week and then it goes away. And he's saying that happiness doesn't revolve around success, but success actually revolves around being happy. And the reason for that is because when a person is in a bit of a happier state, there's a lot of chemicals that are released into the body, into the blood, that sort of help them do a little bit more than someone that's not perhaps very happy. And I suppose that's why they say that these people usually do a little bit more. They're a little bit more willing to put in extra work, a little bit more determined, a little bit more motivated, and are able to do that over a long period of time. And as a result, success tends to start revolving around those types of people. And again, it's defining the concept of happiness and what that looks like, because that can mean a lot of different things to different people. And it doesn't mean that you have to be smiling all day, but it can just mean you are content with what you're doing.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, I like that idea a lot, that if you're happy, then success emerges. It's an emergent property out of that happiness. I mean, I think, we could probably argue that that's not always going to be the case, that there are people who live in absolutely terrible environments and situational factors that could make that quite tricky. But I wanted to pick up on something that you said earlier, and it was really around, it was again on the leadership thing, and you were talking about the involvement of leaders. And we're experiencing right now like a very distributed workforce. People are working from home, the communication channels are very different, the contact that we have with people is different. Do you think that challenges the version of leadership where, leaders are be able to observe people and be able to understand what's happening with them emotionally? It's so much more remote in the digital divide. Yeah.
Very good question, Hilton. Definitely. I mean, the obvious answer would be absolutely. There are some things that we all know, and I'm sure people can relate who's listening to this. There's a lot of things you miss out when it comes to this online type of communication. And there has to be some adaptation then on what was working for you when you were in the real life scenario. How come that worked for you? And then to try and find, how can I get that? So why did that work? And how can I get that type of feedback or whatever it is that was helping you and your team? How can I get that on an online version? And it's asking those two questions, like what was working and what was not working. And then finding out how can we make what was working work, and how can we fix what was not working into an online version. So I know it sounds simple, but it's sometimes looking at those questions in a very in-depth way, and seeing how you can make it work for you online, if that helps.
Well, I think it's quite an interesting conversation to have, to discuss a bit further, which is this whole idea of online culture and online relationships, and I think that's what caught my eye when we first connected. And it's challenging for leaders, it's challenging from a coaching point of view, and even what you were doing today, facilitating and managing the energy in the space. So I'd love you to share some tips or what you've learned about that.
Sure. Yeah, it is a really ongoing process, this whole idea of online culture, and I've had quite a lot of discussions with different people on the topic, and it's more for the aim of learning, like trying to learn certain things that are working, and to figure out things that are working. Again, were very valuable when it was happening in the real office, and to figure out, spend some time reflecting on certain things that weren't valuable. And one of the things that are valuable when it comes to online, and this is something that's immediately jumped out at me, which I think a lot of people can relate to, it's the fact that I've experienced many times when I've worked with certain clients, and I've heard feedback from clients where there is an intimidation factor that can occur when you are face to face with someone in a corporate environment, and they are dressed as perfectly as they can dress in a 3-piece suit, or a lady is just really dressed so smart and really looking the part. And when you are engaging in those meetings, there can be this sort of intimidation factor that occurs where people feel as if it's difficult to approach these type of people because they almost are the perfect person. And the funny thing was, when it comes to online and having to move a lot of things onto online, the one big gain for an online culture is that there is this element of making people more human. Why do I say that? Because we've all experienced it. You've seen someone who is busy speaking, perhaps a big leader in a division, or someone who has their dog bark in the background, or who has their child run onto the screen, or something happens which you have no control over. And also you're seeing and finding these people in their what's the word, comfortable home environment. So there is this element of making them more human. And that's what I find is, like, I'm often surprised when I see some people in their home environments and I see in the background they're just in their study, or they're just in their couch, or they're just in the lounge, and you can just see they're just human. It's made them more comfortable to relate, and actually it's made them more willing to connect, because now you see, wow, this person is just a normal person like me. They just have challenges like me. They sometimes speak while they're on mute, just like me. There's certain things they can't control, and so it makes them really real, if I can say that. And this is from celebrities who you see now having to do interviews in their house, and you see how normal they are. And as well as our business colleagues. And so for me, what that means is, because people are perhaps now more willing to relate, they're more willing to connect. And because they're more willing to connect, there's a big chance that there will be a lot more collaboration taking place. And, with collaboration, that just means that it's only good for the business, because it could lead to the whole idea meritocracy, where people are willing to share ideas, and the best idea should win. At the end of the day. So that's the one big quick win that I've noticed, and it's been a big factor for us to focus on how can we take advantage of people feeling more human and relating to one another.
Yeah, and it sounds like a bit of a cornerstone of the kind of leadership that you were describing earlier, is like a more authentic, we're all human, we're all people just muddling through, and in a way you're saying the digital divide is just a great leveler that makes us all the same. We can't power dress, and we can't have big offices. And in a way, it's just like we connect as human beings. And you see that as like a powerful cornerstone of leadership in your model of leadership. Is that right?
Correct, yeah. So a very good catch there, Hilton. So absolutely, that's and it's probably why I've observed it. It's because I really feel that for people to what's the word? Like I said, collaborate, which is important for me when it comes to having a team use that collective intelligence, use that, harness that ability to work as a team. It is good to feel comfortable and to be real and have that safety to do that. Because I really think the magic happens when there is authenticity. And in order to create that, it has to be a natural process. Like, you can't be fake to create it. And I suppose that's why it is big for me, because the real magic happens when people are real. And I think when people get real and they're just comfortable and they're speaking the truth and they're not scared to try and be someone they're not, they're not faking it. They're actually being real. Then we get to the real issues, and then we can actually move forward. So that's one of the, that's just a little part of what I've noticed.
Curtis, I think that you're really positive, and I can just hear you're very optimistic. And I think there's also a version of online that can really disconnect us as humans. And it's just that you're not in the space with your clients or with your staff to understand, are they okay, aren't they okay? And I guess what I was wondering about is with engagement and online engagement, what are the ways that, I think you work in this space anyway, that you could increase engagement or even measure it? Because it feels very vague, this online culture.
Yeah. So I know from a bit of what I've read with Omnicore as well, you spend a lot of time in also understanding individuals and, looking at the psychometrics, looking at understanding the personalities of people. And we know that some people would adapt better to an online isolated version of the office, and others wouldn't. So some introverted people who are naturally driven by energy and being alone, like they enjoy that, they get energy from being alone, they wouldn't have as much of a problem as this sort of engagement continues of this online version. But those people that need the energy from being around people, they tend to struggle the most, because now they're isolated and they perhaps don't have the freedom of what you're speaking about to engage people and to interact with people as easily as what it was at the office. And so managing those two groups of people It's being aware. Like, to give you a quick example, and I'm going to get to the answer, is we've had 2 sessions. We had a session last week with a team from Nigeria, and again we've had a session this week from a senior financial team in Nigeria. And surprisingly, and it's amazing how this works. The first group, there was a real extroversion that you felt in the group. So for some reason, the group that was put together, they were not shy to have their voices heard. They were very willing to engage, and in both versions, either through the audio or through the chat. So either way, they were willing to engage. Where this group, it's been the complete opposite. So this week we've had to see, how do you engage people that aren't comfortable in engagement.
Curtis, you were speaking a bit about the sessions that you were running, and I was wondering what were some of the things you were covering, and how is it working into Africa? What are the differences that you experience with leadership there?
So great question, and I'll jump on the first part of it, which is about some of the experiences with doing online facilitation. So it has been a challenge to adapt everything to online for various reasons. You don't have that human connection, and you don't have any immediate feedback of whether something is landing or not. And so that is a bit of a challenge, because for those that have done online facilitation, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to speak to a slide with no one. You can't see anyone. You don't hear anyone. And then you just go for it. And once you're done, you ask, is there any questions or are there any feedback? And it is sometimes you hear crickets. And so it can, at first, it definitely was an adaptation I had to make, because I would say I wouldn't say I panicked, but there is definitely this concern of, shucks, is this even making sense what I'm saying? And so the more times you do it, the more comfortable you get with the silence, with the lack of seeing anyone, with the sort of the black hole that you have to stare into, which is just you speaking to the screen and having to do your best by giving energy, but not receiving much back. And I think it's been a big challenge, but one that you can become used to. And to give an example of some of the work we've been doing, so some of the work we've been doing right now is we've actually had a 4-day masterclass. So that is surprising, because some people have had certain, what's the right word, rules for online, like only 30 minutes, sessions can only be 30 minutes, can only be 1 hour, you can't go longer than X, you can't, there's certain rules that people have created. And I think the opportunity is to test, like, can you do a 4-day masterclass? Like, is it still possible to keep people engaged from 8:30 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sitting behind their screen? And funny enough, like, we've been able to succeed in those things. So the biggest surprise for me is to see how you can still keep people engaged, how you can still keep people enjoying a session. And it's got a lot to do with having different approaches to changing things up. Having different ways of engagements, and I'll get to some tactical things or practical things shortly. But one has got to find ways to not do the same thing over and over again. Try different things, and also say things in a way that doesn't feel so long. So I hope this doesn't feel long what I'm talking about now. But there is a way to say stuff where you're saying something and it's maybe been a half an hour, but it feels like 5 minutes. And it's like, stories do that, certain examples do that, certain material you're sharing that really connects does that. So making sure that you are doing a lot of that and moving away from a lot of the boring type of, just going through certain slides that are very content heavy and don't really pull your audience in. So yeah, that's what we've been focusing on. And really, I know this is something you should do in a normal session, in a normal facilitation session, but really zoning in on that to get it right in the online, because it's more important.
Maybe Curtis can pick up on some of those tactical
Yes.
suggestions. I was
Excellent.
interested. Yeah.
So Colleen, some of the tactical things, and it's also depending on what type of platform you use. So I know different companies have different platforms. There are specific that they said this is a non-negotiable. You use this platform. Now we've had to push back sometimes because there are certain limitations to certain platforms on what you can do. So right now, the one that I enjoy the most, and I could have some people that are disagreeing with me on the other end of this, but we found Zoom to be the most the most effective and the most user-friendly in terms of using different types of options. And I'll share some of the big factors why I like Zoom. There are others, Microsoft Teams, Blue Jeans. There's a couple of ones that people use, but Zoom for me works for various reasons in terms of changing up the engagements. So one of the big factors that makes Zoom that makes Zoom work, specifically the Pro version, or mainly just the Pro version of Zoom, you're able to see the entire room. Okay, now I know this is not a Pro version feature, but I'll explain some of the Pro version features just now. But when it comes to Zoom, you can see the whole room. So everyone on the room can become a gallery view, and then what that brings to the experience is that you can ask people in a quick fire question way, so A or B, by responding with reactions. So on Zoom you have the thumbs up reaction and the hand clap reaction. And so you can choose those as an option. So either choose the hand clap or the thumbs up for some quick fire questions. And then you can see the whole room and you can collectively see where everyone's at and how everyone feels about something. And everyone can see how everyone feels. So that's a nice, fun way to recap some sections and also just to have some fun with the teams, because we do some fun questions where it's like, what do you prefer, office or working from home? And then you can see collectively what everyone feels. And I must say, surprisingly, a lot of people have preferred working from the office when I've done that, which is interesting. So I think it's just because some home environments aren't conducive to focusing on work. There's a lot of distractions. But anyway, sorry, that's not getting distracted. So that's one of the factors. The other big thing that we found on Zoom is you have something called breakout rooms. So breakout rooms is where you can break a big group into smaller groups. So suddenly you've got 30 delegates on a call. You can then create breakout rooms, which then breaks them into groups of 4. It's however many you want. You can break a team into 3 if you want to, but we break them into groups of 4 or 5. And then we have small group discussions like you would around a table, and then specifically focusing on a topic they must talk about. So then you ensure everyone is engaging. In the big room, the shy people can get lost because they're not willing or comfortable to engage. But in a small group, you encourage everyone to speak, and we do have different facilitators that then are in those rooms, ensuring everyone has a chance to speak.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so that then creates a very good synergy. When you come back to the main room, you share. Every group has a representative that shares their findings, and so very, very powerful way to have a similar type of experience as what you would in a live facilitation session when it comes to like group discussion. And then some other things is group chat boxes. So some people are not comfortable on the mic, and so they don't want to engage. But using the chat box, which is an obvious one, but really encouraging to use the chat box for some, to give them the choice of, listen, you don't have to speak, but then you have to use the chat box to engage if you're comfortable with that. And so, giving people freedom to feel comfortable as long as they are engaging. But if they aren't comfortable, they might not engage, and so then you lose their inputs.
Those are all good features, it sounds like.
Yeah.
I guess all the platforms will evolve over time, and we'll get more and more cool stuff happening.
Yep.
Maybe useful to kind of pick up on what you said earlier about the elite teams. I don't know if you're just, you were talking sports and sports leadership and just, what's the alignment there?
In terms of alignment, in terms of buy-in.
Well, it sounds like you were saying there's good attributes if you look at elite sportsmen in the way that they kind of drive, practice, all the kind of things that they do to stay at the top of their game. And it sounds like you were equating that to the corporate sector, that there are things we can learn. And I'm interested in what you see that we can learn from that.
So some of the things we can learn is, and this is one of the things I'm fascinated about is handling pressure. So what some sports people get exposed to is perhaps abnormal pressure that I'm putting my fingers in that inverted commas, a normal person wouldn't perhaps be exposed to. So, there are certain things that affect people differently. And so for some people, playing in front of like 50,000 fans and everyone is zoning in on you And not even that, you have millions of people watching you perform, and the spotlight is on you. It does create a tremendous amount of pressure. And so learning about how they handle this type of pressure is very, very, what's the word? You can learn so much from it. So one of the big things I've tried to pick up from some sports athletes is their approach to handling pressure that we can then apply to the workplace in our own way of how we feel pressure, because everyone feels pressure and sees the pressure in different ways. And so what I like about some of the answers I've got from some of the questions I've just brought across to some athletes is the whole idea around preparation. And I think sometimes in the corporates we're so stuck in the day-to-day that we perhaps don't always focus on preparing a bit better for certain situations. And what I mean by preparing, and what I've learned from athletes is let's use speaking, if I may, because speaking is a bit easier to explain, and then people can connect the dots of how that works for them. So a lot of people in the corporate space, when they get asked to speak, there is sometimes a lot of nerves. Depending on the person, perhaps they're not comfortable. And what they then do is they go and practice by themselves. So they will go and practice in a room. Maybe they say to the mirror, they have their own way of doing the practice. What happens then is when that person has practiced, and I mean, they've put in the work, they've put in the time, they know their stuff. They come into the boardroom, and then you know what happens next. And I'm sure some of us can relate to the experience. Like your palms are sweaty, your heart is beating. It depends on how big the presentation is or how many people are in the room. But there's a definite wow. I can't even remember my words. Like there's a blank out, and there's a stuttering and all those things. But you've put in the work. So why now has it not worked? And that's what I've learned from the professional sports environments, is that the reason why sometimes the preparation doesn't lead to the performance in the actual session is because you haven't prepared for the environment. You haven't prepared for the elements you're going to face in the room. And that is the big thing that sportsmen do. You will see that a sportsman will, before a big game, they will have access to the field. They will have access to a practice run. They will taste all the elements, feel all the elements, They will know exactly what to expect the next day. The only additional factor is the crowd. And so when it comes to preparation, it's preparing for the elements, which means you have to be comfortable for the elements that you're going to face. And so sometimes the mic can echo if you're in a big room. You need to know that's going to happen. You need to be prepared for that. You need to be comfortable with that. And so when it comes to preparation, it's about really becoming prepared for the elements, comfortable with the elements you might face. And that means people staring at you. It means the boardroom might echo. It means a lot of different things. And that's why I'm a big believer in helping people prepare as if it's the real thing, and becoming comfortable in that, and knowing the only new element would be the people.
Yeah, I was watching a video yesterday. I was going through a program, and the program was about effective sales. And they were saying, when you practice, first of all, practice your pitch. But do that with your colleagues, and let your colleagues throw difficult questions at you. Let them try rattle you and ask all the curveball kind of things, so that when you go and do it in the real world, you've learned how to navigate through those difficult things. And I think that's exactly what you're saying. In the corporate sector, we often show up and we kind of expect it to happen, but they were really emphasizing practice beforehand. It sounds funny, but just go do that.
That's it. So spot on, and very that's the connection, right? It's exactly what that sales pitch was about. It's about becoming comfortable with the elements that will throw you off, because people are good at preparing for what to say, but not prepared for what happens when you're in this real life environment, and now you're like, shucks, I'm just thrown off here. I don't know what to do, right. And then I get irritated because I feel so empathetic to them, because it's not that they haven't put in the work, they just haven't put it to get comfortable with those elements that could throw you off. And so that's just a big thing.
Well, I think that's interesting now with Zoom and these types of technologies, that you can record it and watch it, although it is excruciating. It's much easier to get feedback and to get self-awareness that way.
Yeah. And on that point, Colleen, to add to practicality of online sessions, so it is really about practicing speaking to a slide, and that's what you would experience. So like you say, it's a bit easier to replicate an online session, because most times you'll be speaking to a slide, the camera is on you, and you might just put your little icon, like you could do a Zoom session by yourself. You put the little icon so you can see yourself, you speak to the slide, and that's very close to what you would experience in a live session. So it's very easy to replicate the environments, and you're not thrown off as much. But in saying that, we've had very big speakers who have been thrown off by, and this is recent, in the recent adaptation, have been thrown off by the lack of connection, and they actually lose their words. It's amazing to see how some people are thrown off completely by the lack of engagements, and they think that they haven't spoken correctly, and there's a bit of panic. And I'm talking to myself as well. I was part of that group, not the big speaker group, but the group that was thrown off by the lack of engagement.
Curtis, I wanted to ask you a bit about your other passion, which is this wonderful idea that you created, your NGO, where you
the Mental Gains Network.
Yes, I think that's so special.
Yeah.
Who's your most favorite person that you've interviewed, and why?
Sure. So just in case they listen to me, some of the colleagues, I can't probably give an answer to that, because it's you don't want to choose favorites, but I would say every session has been amazing in its own way, and I wish I could do more of them. And a lot of it is my own doing, because I must just be a bit more proactive. And I did listen a bit to the previous podcast, and I heard there about proactivity and how powerful that is, right? And same for me. Like, I think the big factor with these interviews was the heart of learning a bit more about the mental side of the sports game in a real way. So sometimes we talk about the mental side, but in a way that doesn't connect to me. Like, I don't understand what some people mean about visualization or those types of really sports concepts. But what does it mean when you feel pressure? What does it mean when you're working towards a goal? What does it mean when you are, as I mentioned, preparing for the elements, preparing for the environments? And that has been amazing to use that information and share it with with different corporate teams, because I love how real athletes can get when you're with them in a one-on-one situation, and again, how human they are. I know some people are going to laugh at me for saying this, but I just love when I see people that are being human and being real, because sometimes we put on a front and we miss out on the real magic of connection there, because you can't connect if you're not really being real with one another. So quickly on that, sorry, Colleen, just to help with the question. The one big interview was with a mentor of mine, and that's Paddy Upton. So Paddy Upton is a cricket coach, and he's coached a lot of world teams. He was the Indian mental conditioning coach that helped them win the Cricket World Cup. And so one of the big interviews I had with him is again learning this concept of his philosophy with coaching is about harnessing the collective intelligence of the team. So that's one of the philosophies I've learned from him. And I just love the approach of not telling the team what to do as a coach, but asking for the input from the players. And the reason why he does that is because there's so much experience that sits in the change room, but often people aren't drawing that experience out and using that to create the plan. And I love that in the sports environments where he actually did that and had a lot of success by doing that. Not telling the players, but hearing their opinions.
I guess that's the analog there is in leadership, is that you don't need to have all the answers. You've got great people around you, and you really want to help them find the answers and bring those answers to you rather than, I think it's that kind of thinking.
He calls it creating thinking players. So South African context, we coach in a very what's a hierarchical? Is that the right word? Right? It's a hierarchy. Like, you listen to me, I'll tell you what to do. And Paddy's observation was it's shocking to see some professional athletes that come to practice and ask the coach what to do. And he's saying how can that be? You've been a professional for 8 years, 10 years, and you still don't know what to do, and waiting for the coach to instruct you. And that's how sometimes the players aren't able to think for themselves, if I can say that. Like, they haven't realized, or they haven't spent time becoming their own coach and thinking for what do they need today? What do they need to work on today? Like, besides what the coach says, what must I get better at? And there are a lot of athletes that do that, but there are still some that from a young age have been told what to do, And it stays with him in the professional environments where you have people that are still waiting to be told and not knowing what I need to do because I know myself well.
Yeah, you just want to liberate the intelligence in your teams to emerge and give permission in a way for people to be able to bring their own actions and ideas and to foreground them as much as possible.
Exactly, and he is open to saying there are challenges to this. Like, it's not the perfect solution. There are different obstacles and different challenges, and it comes with its own problems as well. But there are also a lot of rewards from it. And he worked with a lot of international T20 teams. So there you have a lot of different countries, different nationalities, a lot of experience, and that was his real, why these people know a lot more collectively than me. So let's together discuss and let's pull out the ideas together and give them the environments and the culture to do that. So you've got to build that.
And Curtis, what's your view of, the business and sort of what's going to happen in South Africa, and how are you guys coping with the challenges?
So, I think my answer is just a very, very, shallow answer in this. I haven't done proper analysis in really understanding the difference, real understandings of the statistics and reports and actual truth of what is going on. But I think some of the answers to it is quite obvious to some. There are certain industries that are really struggling, and the knock-on effect that has is immense. The whole thing of the domino effect, where one person affected affects another person, which affects another person, which affects the buying power of another person. So it's all about the buying power, and if people's buying powers are getting taken away, that will affect different businesses in different ways. So that's more of a concern for me, is that the industries that are affected, we might not feel it directly right now, but in the long run, you will definitely feel that knock-on effect because of the lack of buying power.
So maybe staying with the macro environment, and really the last question from me is, and it's a curveball question, Curtis, so I don't mind if you run for cover.
You're doing so well.
But if we put you in charge of the transformation of leadership with the South African government, what would you want to be telling them?
So, wow, definitely a curveball question. But let me get back to just briefly the GPS methodology. So, the cliched thing of a leader must know where we're going, the destination. But equally as important is a leader must know the current location. And I think perhaps the government doesn't know the truth of where we are right now. And maybe it's because we don't want to look or whatever it might be. But I think we need to know what is the current reality. So for a GPS to work, it needs to know your destination. But then equally important, it needs to know currently where are you. Not where you wish you were, or not where you think you were, or not where you say you are. Because, politicians can say we are somewhere, but where are we right now? And I think we need to get to the truth of raw facts. Where are we? And I think that could help, because that's your platform to then figure out, if we know where we are, we can then navigate to get to the vision, which is what we also have to create. So for me, it would be, going back to those basics, very simply, where are we going? Where are we right now, truthfully? And how will we start making the steps to get there?
Yeah, it's a good answer, because, you just want people to, and you want politicians also to be real and stop politicking and, have the interests of the country at heart and stop worrying about their own, individual political trajectories. And, knowing where you are as a country would be a really good start.
And for me, it's if it's horrible, let's say it's horrible.
Yeah, completely.
I think people, human beings, I think they would prefer knowing with certainty where we are than having the uncertainty of not knowing where we are. And so what I mean is certainty of knowing we are in a bad place. And I think people are certain of that. There's a lot of people that are certain, but hearing it, saying, acknowledging, guys, this is where we are. And I think, the Springboks did that so well with the leadership of Rassie Erasmus, the coach. If you look a bit into it, you'll see that they went through one of their worst patches in history. The Springboks, South African national rugby team. Just for anyone that perhaps doesn't know who the Springboks are, but and if you hear and the players speaking, it was that raw truth that got them going, because you create the platform to say, this is where we are, and we're not in a good place, but let's be honest where we are. And then it gives you that true platform to know, okay, let's navigate going forward. But I think sometimes business miss that. They get the vision right. Everyone gets the vision right, but they miss the current reality part.
And Curtis, from the kind of work that you do, so what do you offer leadership and organizations? What are some of the flagship offerings that you have?
So dovetailing off my previous comment, so you can see strategy is a big part, but not normal strategy which involves a lot of the people elements. So we don't focus too much on the business analytical side. We have partners that do that for us, but we focus specifically on the people side, and the structure of the business, and we create the strategy with the team, with the philosophy I spoke about earlier, harnessing collective intelligence, but then seeing that the structure and the team can drive the strategy forward. So we walk with the team to do that, really focusing on the people side of things. And other things we offer is enhancing performance when it comes to teams, specifically then focusing on leadership, as I mentioned. So leadership is so broad, but the focus that I like is how do you ensure that we can increase performance by focusing on different elements of the leadership, and that is you know, in the space we'll know how much that is, but it's focusing on so many different elements of leadership, understanding that everyone is their own leader in their own way, and figuring out how do we then get you moving forward with that philosophy. And so one more thing that we do is also a big part is we do a lot of these innovation sessions. And so we also focus a lot on, we call it like a business acumen session, where we focus on helping employees become entrepreneurs. So not entrepreneurs, the entrepreneurs. So how do they work on the business they are working in? And so that requires some innovation, that requires some thinking. And you can hear a lot of what I've spoken about earlier. It's all adapted into our processes of making thinking employees as well. People that can think, people that can help drive the business forward. And improve it from the inside going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I know I said it was my last question. This isn't really a question, it's a statement, but it just carries on from what you were saying, is that, like, I recognize my best employees live their life as if they own the business. They like show up to work as if it's their personal business. And, you know, I think that's like a really amazing benchmark for someone who, you know, you just want all, like, everyone to be like that.
And I did do a bit of my research. Like I said, I did listen to a bit of the previous podcast, and I love what was said there, where it was like, not everyone's going to be like that. And so not to, like you say, Hilton, I agree, that is the ideal employee everyone wants. And it's like your star players in a team, but you only have a few of them. And then, you know, to be comfortable with the rest and to still find a way to enhance their performance in their own way. Like what you mentioned with leadership, like everyone has their own style, but let's just be real about it. Tell me the truth. And I think that's a big factor for me, is like, how can we get to be real and don't try and be someone that you're not, because that's not good for anyone.
I really like that. And I think it's a great sort of place to reflect and wrap up, because it's as if that everyone in a company is expected to be the superstar. And if you're not the superstar, then, you know, you may be deemed as, you know, not a high performer, but you're performing in your own way. And I think it can cause, you know, some toxic environments where people are comparing themselves the whole time to that team or that person. And so I think that's very insightful.
You know, and just, Colleen, I know we're ending, just on that point. We've had a case where you've seen someone really get unhappy. And I spoke a bit about happiness, and I know some people will either agree or disagree with that statement, but it really is a big factor, because they're trying to be this person, and it's causing so much unhappiness because they're not being true to themselves. And then they're thinking they have to perform like that person's performing. It's firstly not their strengths, it's not their strength zone, but they're trying to do it. And anyway, it just drags them down. And it's so freeing when a person can find their own space to perform, and it might not be what's, like, if I can say, society expects it to be, but it's so vital to the team moving forward. And acknowledging that person and showing their value, that it's significant, is also important from the leader.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think even as a business, we rely so much on, like, a layer of people to just show up and execute and just do their job and, like, do it well. And our business really just it's fueled by that exact kind of energy.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you so much, Curtis. It was really wonderful
Thank you. Thanks, Colleen. Thanks,
join with
Hilton.
you, and
Thanks,
we look
Curtis.
forward to being in touch in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And keep up the great work that you guys are doing. It's also really making an impact for a lot of people out there. So appreciate your work as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. We really hope you enjoyed the episode. It would help us a lot if you subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars if possible, and check out our website www.omnicore.co.za. You'll find our previous episodes and other blogs and helpful resources, and we look forward to connecting in the next episode.